And what scares you more than a sense of emptiness and meaninglessness? So science today is stoking fear rather than dispelling fear. Hi everybody. I want to talk today about something that ties in a little bit with what I talked about with Graham Pemberton in my interview with him last week, towards the end of that episode. And it has to do with fear, and it has to do with what has transpired in history when it comes to science and spirituality. And fear is at the core of this message here. Because what we have to dispel is fear. Fear is our biggest enemy, I think. Or rather, fear has its functions, but fear is the enemy to creation and creativity. Creativity and fear make very bad bedfellows. They don't go together. Science came along. Western science, traditional science as we perceive science today, 300-400 years ago, on a big scale, came onto the stage on a big scale. And science, when science came, it dispelled fear. It dispelled fear because the fear that people felt, for the most part, during that period, 300-400-500 years ago, had to do with the non-physical realm, what you couldn't see, what you couldn't measure. The religious realm, you might say, because the religion had, in a way, hijacked spirituality. So it had taken spirituality and put it in a box full of dogmas and rules and all that. But anyway, so religion and priests and the church and whatever had taken over the interpretation of what was spirituality. But anyway, people were afraid of ghosts. They were afraid of what might happen when they die, if they were going to go to hell or go to heaven. So they lived in fear in many respects because of that, because of fear of things they couldn't see or measure. And science came along, and science dispelled this fear. Science helped us to understand that we didn't have to be afraid of ghosts, that there was so much to be explained about the physical world. Newton showed us that, and then scores of scientists came along during the 1700s, 1800s, and 1900s and showed us so many more things about reality that made us understand, we don't have to be afraid of this and that or the other, So science was excellent at dispelling that fear. And at one point, I would say late 1800s, early 1900s, when Western science was almost exploding and almost taking over taking over the role of the church almost. And at that point, I would say during the period that I just mentioned, science even instilled hope in people. Not just dispelled the old fear of ghosts and things like that, but also instilled hope, because there was so much progress all the time. New steps were being taken all the way up to quantum physics and what that has led to, but which leads to different conclusions. But anyway, far into the 1900s, there was, I would say that science, to a large extent in the Western world at least, instilled hope in people that science would eventually give us all the answers. We will know everything. We will understand everything about ourselves, our bodies, what we are, about the universe, why we are here, and how everything works, and where it started and where it ended. And eventually, this will give us the meaning of life. We will understand the meaning of life thanks to science. But as you all know, we have come far since then, or quite a bit further anyway, and it's becoming ever clearer that science in that traditional Western sense will never be able to give us the answers to those very deep, profound questions about what we are, who we are, why we are here, what the purpose and the point of the whole thing is. That is never going to happen. those answers, the most profound answers, are more and more beginning to look like spiritual answers. And I am convinced, and you know that who have been listening to me before, convinced that in the future, I don't know if it's going to take 50 years or 100 years or 200 years, but not that extremely far distant future, we will not have this dichotomy between science and spirituality anymore, because there's really no point, because there is no border, there is no line. So what's happening today is rather, going back to the fear issue here, that science is stoking fear. It has gone from being excellent at dispelling fear to stoking fear. Why? Because, well, for two reasons. One reason, or many reasons. One of the reasons being that science is presenting to us all kinds of scenarios about what might happen with the environment, climate change, new pandemics, this, that, or the other that might happen, and it's based on cold calculations that are being presented to us. No love there, no intuition there, just cold calculations, which instills stokes fear in us. And also the fact that we more and more realize that we will not have the fantastic, wonderful answers from science that will tell us why we are here and the meaning of our lives. Since we realize that those answers will never come from science, science kind of reinforces, exacerbates a sense of emptiness. And what scares you more than a sense of emptiness and meaninglessness? So science today is stoking fear rather than dispelling fear. So what do we have to do? Well, of course, we have to think about I always forget this word, dialectics. I think the word is dialectics in the Hegelian sense. Hegel talked about dialectics, that you have a thesis and then you have an antithesis that goes in the opposite direction, and then you have a synthesis which takes into account the best parts of both of these viewpoints, and you get a third viewpoint which is on a higher level and is a better one and a wiser one. And that synthesis has to be the merger between science and spirituality, because to dispel fear today, to dispel this new fear that is stoked by science, we have to go back to the spiritual way of looking at why we are here and what we are, but not in the immature version that was predominant 400 or 500 years ago, but take the best parts of that, the wise parts of that, the self-evident parts of it. So this is what we have to synthesize with science. Then we will be able to dispel fear once again. And why dispel fear? Because fear is destructive. There are two basic forces in the universe, and the creative force is love, and the destructive force is fear. They are both needed, but we have to realize that we cannot create anything in this world without love. And I'm not talking about the personal love or anything like that. I'm talking about the unconditional baseline love that creates this whole universe. And we are creative beings. We create our lives. We will be able to understand that we are more powerful than we have been conditioned to believe when we come to this conclusion, and we live a life where we understand that, wow, so what these spiritual traditions have been talking about for thousands and thousands of years, that's actually science at the most basic level, when we come down to the questions of what are we really, and what is this, and why are we here? So we come full circle. From fear of one thing to fear of another thing to no fear. That's my hope anyway. So this is what I wanted to talk about today. Now have a wonderful weekend. I love you. See you next time. Bye-bye. If you like this video and other interviews and talks on Mind the Shift, please like, share, and subscribe. I appreciate all the support. Thank you.